Prenup is essentially a contract. You are contracting with your future spouse to decide how property is going to be divided in the event of a divorce or even in the event of your death. Postnup is also essentially a contract. You are already married and you and your spouse are deciding how your property will be divided. We take what would be or what is community property and now we make it the separate property of the two spouses. And typically no community property would be created during the rest of the marriage. The perfect time to decide whether a prenup or a postnup makes sense to you as soon as you have questions or concerns about how property would be divided. It's better to do it when you and your spouse are still have a good relationship and are on kind of the same page about things instead of waiting until we're in an adversarial situation and a divorce has been filed. A prenup and a postnup can cover pretty much anything property related. There are rules about kids, right? We can't contract for child support amounts and things like that because that would be against Texas public policy and not in the best interest of the kids. But if it deals with property, we can do it in a prenup or a postnup. And when we're talking about property, we're talking about pretty much anything you can own. It could be business, it could be your retirement accounts, it could be the house you live in, the cars you drive, the bank accounts that you own, anything that you have an ownership stake in, even your dog, technically is property, could be divided in a prenup or postnup. So the question of how a prenup or a postnup will be enforced in Texas really depends on how the documents were entered into in the first place. So if you're going to try to do what we call a collateral attack on a prenup or a postnup, you would go back and look for things like duress in the signing of the documents. Duress is kind of hard to prove. Nobody's holding a gun to your head to have you sign. So duress is a way to collaterally attack. It's not typically that useful of a weapon. That leaves us with two other main streams of attack. One is whether or not there was a disclosure of assets prior to entering into the agreement. You have to know what kind of property and liabilities your spouse or future spouse has before you can waive your interest in them. And the other thing is whether both parties were represented by an attorney to give them advice during the process. A spouse or future spouse can waive the right to go have an attorney review the document. If I were you, I would strongly encourage them to take that step because it just adds one more layer of protection in whether or not that document could be attacked later and ultimately busted. And now everything that you've accumulated during the marriage that you thought was your separate property is now community property and subject to division by the court. So if you have entered into a prenup or a postnup and now you're facing a divorce and you want to see if the agreement that you entered into is possibly subject to collateral attack, the first step is to get with your attorney and have them review the document for potential holes that could be utilized to bring that attack. Of course, the other side is going to say, no, this is enforceable. This is good. So what that means is you're probably going to have a hearing in front of the court and have the court decide whether or not the prenup or postnup stands up in court. If the court says, yes, this is good, well, now you're back to dividing property according to what was in the prenup or the postnup. If the court agrees with you that this actually doesn't hold water, well, now it's dissolved and it's a regular divorce, and all the property that was accumulated during the marriage is presumed to be community property and is subject to division by the court. Pro tip about retirement accounts. If you enter into a prenup, there are certain aspects of your retirement account that you can only waive as a spouse. So when you enter into a prenup, you're not yet a spouse, and so they aren't waived. So there is a ratification process that you go through after the marriage to ratify your prenup, and that makes all retirement your separate property at that point, if that's what's in your agreement. If you skip that step, potentially there still are some aspects of your retirement accounts that would be considered community property. So if you have questions about prenups or postnups, call us. We'd be happy to talk to you.